spicefm.co.uk.
The ultimate What's On guide for the region, now on spicefm.co.uk. Also, check out all your favourite podcasts, Spice FM schedules, and all your favourite presenters. Log on today, spicefm.co.uk. Don't forget to connect with us on socials, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on TikTok at SpiceFM. Stay connected.
It's a vibe that they don't demonstrate like.
Summer 1977, South Shields. Muhammad Ali is coming to town. Live Theatre presents Champion by Ishi Din. Set around the great boxer's now legendary visit to the Northeast, two brothers' lives are turned upside down in a punchy play that hits hard. Thursday 13th of February to Saturday 8th of March, taking place at Live Theatre, Newcastle. www.live.org.uk 0191 232 1232.
The ultimate What's On guide for the region, now on spicefm.co.uk. Also, check out all your favourite podcasts, Spice FM schedules, and all your favourite presenters. Log on today, spicefm.co.uk. Don't forget to connect with us on socials, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on TikTok at SpiceFM. Stay connected.
It's a vibe that they don't demonstrate like.
It's Red Hot Radio. Spice FM 98.8 FM.
Hello everyone, and I'm Mayank Patel. I'm back with the Property Pulse, my radio show again. And today I'm excited to have Martin Wardle over here, who is a chartered tax advisor. Hi Martin.
Hi Mayank, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm alright. How was your morning?
Pretty good, thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'll introduce Martin first of all, and then we'll go further. Martin is a chartered tax advisor, as we already discussed. Martin has been involved in property investment since 2000. Am I right, Martin?
Yeah, it's about 25 years. I can't remember exactly.
Wow.
It's the kind of thing you should remember, but it was about then.
Yeah. So he has got loads of experience in owning the property as well, because he's one of the landlord in the Northeast as well. And the North. He mentioned me, I never knew about it, but he mentioned me that the Northeast England is one of the best area in England where you can invest, and the return on investment is one of the best. Is it correct?
Yeah, that's right. If you look at the price of the property and you look at the rent you can get for the property, and that's how you work out the ratio of the return on investment. You can buy properties reasonably cheap here, but get a pretty good return on investment.
Yeah.
It's largely because the properties aren't worth much.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed blessing, but you can buy cheap houses and get a decent rent for them.
Decent rent for that, yeah. So, Martin, just a curious question. Did you start to invest in Northeast initially, or did you invest somewhere else first and then came here?
Yeah, so my first rental was very much like a lot of people's first rentals. I was an accidental landlord originally. I bought a house, lived in it, and when I moved out, at the time, so this is going back 25 years, it was easier to keep the old house than it was to sell it to move house. So we just kept the house and put a tenant in, and that was it. That was the start.
Yeah.
And then, of course, on the build up to, property always looks at, I think, pre-crash and post-crash, so before 2008 and after 2008. So before 2008, it was actually relatively easy to build up a property portfolio because every 6 months house prices went up, 5, 10, 15%. So it was quite easy back then.
All right, okay. So do you think that much has been changed so far in Northeast, or?
Yeah, what's interesting about the Northeast is that I think the property is funny because I think there's different markets across the country anyway, but the Northeast also has its own markets.
Yeah.
And I think what you've got now is, so I mentioned pre-crash and post-crash. There are people who bought properties in 2006, 7 and 8 who own those properties now, and they're not really worth any more than they were when they bought them.
Wow.
Because what you saw is that it basically the lower end of the market, the Tyneside flats, the ex-local authority properties, a lot of those properties have never really gone up in value a great deal. So it is possible to add value through development and refurb, etc. But if you just look at the pure numbers, they haven't really gone up in value. Meanwhile, a lot of houses now, most younger professionals and younger couples now they don't want to live in an old Tyneside flat.
Yeah.
So they're skipping that first step on the property ladder altogether and going straight for new build. You know, personally, I don't like new build houses or shoeboxes, but I would much rather have an old drafty house than a modern one. But so you've got this interesting dilemma that the average house price looks like it's going great in the northeast, but actually you've got the lower end of the market that hasn't really moved a great deal. So you've got to really work to add value in that end.
Yeah, very good information. So, did you started to invest in Northeast from initially then? In that case, isn't it?
So all of my properties are in Gateshead, probably all within about 3 mile of where I grew up. Wow. Like a lot of landlords, I knew an area, so that's where I bought. And it's good advice if you're buying property, try to make sure you really know the area. It's, you know, this. I know landlords with a house in Luton, a house in Edinburgh, and, you know, a house in Windermere. Yeah, they're completely different markets. It's really quite hard to be good at 3 totally different markets. So a lot of landlords buy in the same area, and I did exactly the same thing.
I do the same thing as well. Means some of the postcodes I have fixed, means I don't go out of those postcodes.
Yeah.
So same with the builders as well, isn't it? Because I tried to send one of the builder, means fortunately or unfortunately, I bought one property in Middlesbrough before a few years, and then I asked the builders. Nobody wanted to go there.
Yeah, no, that's that. So in property, they talk a lot about building your team, about having a good team of people. You need to be able to get good finance. Efficiently. You need a solicitor who knows what they're doing. But once you've got a property, you really then need to understand the maintenance and the ongoing management of the property. And if you work in an area, it's much easier to have a good team. So if nothing else, it's easier to get your gas checks done if they're all within 3 mile of each other. You know, the gas engineer just does them all in a couple of days, and that's nice and simple.
You just need to give the address and they will finish everything.
Absolutely. So, you know, there are a lot of advantages to having a single area. Of course, the downside of having a single area is you're kind of bound by that area. So if the area goes down, or, you know, it's quite hard to then flex because you're stuck.
That's really good information. And means I try to say the people as well that if you don't know the area, means I myself would never go in the area where I don't know things, you know. So due diligence is really good before you buy.
You see it quite a lot. So I've seen people over the years who say, I bought a house in Hartlepool, unseen, and then, you know, they're almost giving it away now. You know, or 40 grand for a house it was a great bargain. But now it's on an empty street where, you know, it's basically boarded up and you can't give it away. And they're still paying, admittedly, a small mortgage, but they've got a small mortgage and council tax forever. Or they've got to find a way to persuade the bank to take the house off them. But the bank don't want it. It's not worth anything. So that's a great example of where it can easily go wrong.
And the people means in some of those streets, some of those areas where the property prices are very low, I think you struggle to get the tenants as well, isn't it?
Possibly. I've me and my wife. So I say we sometimes. I mean me and my wife Rebecca. So we've got property in Peelaw and Heworth. That's where our properties are. And I remember years ago meeting a guy who said, "Why have you got property in Peelaw? Nobody wants to live in Peelaw." But it's full. Peelaw's full. Gateshead's full. Whitley Bay's, everywhere's full. There aren't enough houses. And of course, in any particular area, you've got people who grew up in that area who want to stay in that area. They want to stay beside their parents, their in-laws, for when they have kids. So it doesn't really matter where a property is. You'll probably rent it. What you might find is you might struggle to put tenants into an area if they're not from a similar area. So I don't really know how to say that without possibly offending people, but
I know.
You wouldn't put someone from, you know, Chelsea isn't probably going to be happy in one of my downstairs 2-bed flats in Peelaw. But to be fair, no different to someone from Peelaw wouldn't fit in Chelsea either. You know, so areas have their own character, their own feel, and people are normally happy to rent there just the same as anywhere else.
Yeah, that's cool. And a curious question again, Martin. How did you start the taxation thing, or did you started it first before you?
So they kind of overlapped. I actually started in tax almost accidentally as well.
Wow.
So I must be charmed because I did two things accidentally and they've both looked after me pretty well. I was actually an office junior. I was a filing clerk.
Wow.
And so in 1993, not many people could, type on a computer and knew how computers worked. I'd always been interested in computers.
Yeah.
So because I could type, just as computers were being brought into the tax world and the accountancy world, I got the job of entering data onto the computer. And that was it. I became the guy who could, basically type and get data into the computer. So I then started doing tax returns, payroll, and I worked my way up from there.
Oh,
And then did qualifications, and so I sit before you, a chartered tax advisor who used to be a filing clerk.
wow, that's really great achievement, isn't it?
I'm a great believer in saying yes.
Yeah.
I know it sounds quite corny, but if you get an opportunity to do something that's just the right level of scary, I think it's always worth giving it a try and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
And it's served me well so far.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, tell me something about your company and how you help the landlords at the moment.
Yeah.
Please.
So what basically, because I'm a chartered tax advisor and a landlord, what that gives me is not a unique position, but a pretty good position, I would say, in that when you're speaking to a landlord and they talk about their refurb, or they talk about BRRR, or they talk about rent to SA, there's a whole language that exists within the property world. And I think if you can't speak it or you don't understand it, it slows you down when trying to help those landlords. So because I've been involved in the sector for so long, I understand the challenges that landlords face.
Yeah.
And then obviously I'm a chartered tax advisor, so helping landlords with tax seems like a no-brainer. So I'm actually setting up at the moment a brand new firm that will specifically look after landlords and their taxes. It's
Wow.
nice and simple. Yeah.
And what's the name of your firm?
So the firm is called TH Ward.
Yeah.
And I, like I say, all I'm aiming for is landlords, so individuals who need to submit tax returns, because there's a lot of change and there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah.
A lot of people these days seem to be getting tax advice from Instagram from people who aren't tax advisors,
Yeah.
which I find quite worrying. Without sounding too soft, I think you should get your tax advice from your tax advisor.
Yeah.
If you want property investment advice, speak to a property investor.
Yeah.
Just the same as I know you had Paul Hampton on, if I want mortgage advice, I
Yeah.
speak to a broker.
Yeah.
I think it's important you get the right advice from the right people.
Yeah, and I don't like when the people put their input on social media. Somebody asks a question about the tax and how crucial it is to get the right information. Then.
Yeah, so
especially about the taxation and all.
yeah. Well, one thing I always say about tax is there isn't a single answer. There is no simple answer either.
Yeah.
So you can ask me a very genuine question, and one that we get all the time at the moment is, should I buy properties as an individual or should I buy them through a limited company? And there's a good reason why people ask that question. There isn't a single answer or a simple answer. The answer is different for every single person. And so what I always try to say to people is, well, but why are you buying property? What is it you want from the property?
Yeah.
If you've got no other income and you want 3 Tyneside flats, you should almost certainly never put them into a company. If you've got a 6-figure salary and you want to buy 300 Tyneside flats, you should almost certainly have a company.
Yeah.
And everyone else falls somewhere in between those examples.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I don't know why people don't do the due diligence or talk to the specialist like you and then go ahead like that, because some of the friends one of my friend yesterday asked me, he's called Tarun Tangar, and he asked me that I have got this problem. Means I'll discuss with you
Yeah.
later on after the show. But it was about the private residence relief and all.
Yes.
And he got so much advice from the friends and relatives, I suppose. And then he was confused at what to do.
Well, a classic myth around private residence relief, or principal private residence relief, to give it its proper title, is that you can basically move into any property and it becomes exempt, and that just isn't the case. So a lot of people think, well, let's say I bought my first property 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, I did live in that house. It was my home for probably about 18 months. I
Right.
moved out and I haven't lived there since. So a lot of people think because I used to live there, it's totally exempt, but it's not. The period when I lived there is exempt, and there are some other little reliefs that exempt parts of the rest of the ownership. But in the main, 23 years worth of that property is taxable, and maybe a couple of years is exempt from the start. Now, in reverse, a lot of people think, well, I've owned a rental property for 25 years. I'll just move into it before I sell it. Again, that just doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So what you have is and again, if you search for this, you'll see an Instagram or a TikTok that says, just move into your house, it's tax-free. Again, it's not.
Not, yeah. And there is something like 9 months period which you can always claim, is it?
Yeah, well, as long as you've lived there. So on the property that I mentioned, my first house, the period when I lived there is exempt, and the last 9 months.
Right.
So, like I say, 25 years of ownership, about 23 years of that will be exempt. 23 years will be taxable, and about 2 years exempt. But if I own it for another 25 years, there'll still only be 2 years exempt. It doesn't change because I can't magic the fact that I lived there for 25 years. I just didn't.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's very interesting with some of the information. Means I was asked and I didn't have much idea about it. So I thought I would discuss with somebody like you and then
Yeah.
let him know. But yeah, it's very important, isn't it? That, and especially when the tax and HMRC is concerned, I think I would definitely check everything.
Well, something that wasn't really spotted in the budget or hasn't been talked about much is the appointment of 5,000 new compliance officers. Wow. So a lot of people don't realise just how much information HMRC have about you. Yeah. And it's just the fact that they don't have the resource or the manpower to actually investigate. Yeah. So if they put these 5,000 new people and give them free rein to look at the information they've already got on you, there's going to be a lot of people who are getting a knock on the door that they weren't expecting. Yeah. And HMRC's got some pretty good support from the courts and the legal system to be able to fine, seize assets. And if they think you've done something particularly bad, they can raise criminal charges as well. Yeah, I know. But for the most people, what they do is they'll take the tax from you that should have been paid, and then they'll apply a multiplier. So, if you owe £1,000, they'll add 20 to 30% onto that straight away. If it's an overseas property, they can double the amount of tax. Right. So yeah, they've got a lot of power that people just don't realise. And I think we've been in a period where HMRC haven't been particularly aggressive because they've been understaffed. Yeah. And they've been occupied with furlough, bounce back loans, and all of the coronavirus support that fell under their wing. So I think we're about to see a period of a lot more activity from HMRC, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think they're recruiting quite a few people as well, isn't it?
Yeah, 5,000 new people.
Really?
5,000.
Wow.
Just let that sink in. It's a lot of people.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So yeah, and remember, the government as a body knows exactly how many properties you own, because every purchase goes to the land registry, every stamp duty form goes to HMRC, every local authority claim for income support or housing support, your landlord name is on there. Wow. Every landlord insurance that you take out, every gas check you do, all of that information is available to HMRC, and it's quite easy for them to connect those dots.
Even the gas check certificate, is it?
Well, the Gas Safe Register is a government quango, isn't it? It's a government authorised body. Now it's not that HMRC can just simply sit there and say, let's see if Marty's got a gas check on a property. they would have to demonstrate that they believe there's reasonable evidence of a failure to report.
Right.
But that's quite an easy argument.
Yeah.
And HMRC have done this in the past. They carried out an offshore, let's just say, list of inquiries where they asked credit card companies for a list of people who were spending money in the UK, but the balance was being settled from overseas.
Wow.
Now, that seemed like a great way not to show income in the UK,
Yeah.
but because HMRC went to the courts and said, we think people are doing that to hide non-UK income,
Yeah.
the court said, yeah, great, you can have all of that information. So they got all of that information from all the credit card providers. And it would be very easy for them to do exactly the same thing with insurance companies, GasSafe, local authorities, and all of those bodies.
Yeah.
Ignoring the fact, sorry, Mayank, that they do already write out to letting agents to say, give me a list of the landlords you act for.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Most people don't realise that. But if you speak to a letting agent and
Yeah.
just ask them when the last time that happened was, it's probably more recent than you think, and it happens quite regularly.
Very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, very, very good information about the taxation. So, guys, with this, we'll have a little break with one great track. Hope you enjoy, and we'll be back soon. Stay tuned in, and we have got a very interesting conversation going on over here.
चांद तारों से कहो अभी ठहरे जरा, चांद तारों से कहो कि अभी ठहरे जरा। पहले इश्क लड़ा लूं उसके बाद लाऊंगा, पहले इश्क लड़ा लूं उसके बाद लाऊंगा। तेरे वास्ते फलक से मैं चांद लाऊंगा, 16-17 सितारे संग बांध लाऊंगा। देखा जाए तो वैसे अपने तो सारे पैसे रह के जमीन पे ही वसूल हैं। चेहरा है तेरा चंदा, नैना तेरे सितारे, अंबर तक जाना ही फिजूल है, अंबर तक जाना ही फिजूल है। इसके बाद भी अगर तुझे चैन ना मिले, पूरी करके मैं तेरी ये मुराद आऊंगा। तेरे वास्ते फलक से मैं चांद लाऊंगा, 16-17 सितारे संग बांध लाऊंगा। तेरे वास्ते फलक से मैं चांद लाऊंगा, 16-17 सितारे संग बांध लाऊंगा।
And we are back again. I am with Martin Wardell, the Chartered Tax Advisor over here. So guys, we were just discussing, and that was my another question as well. I think Martin has already shared some light towards that topic, but I'll ask him again in if he can give a little bit precise answer. So, Martin, who is sharing information about landlords with HMRC?
So I think quite a lot of people don't realise just how much information they've got. And I touched on this very slightly, but we in the tax world, we see all of the dots. We understand how the systems work, and I think so. Even if I keep it to things that we already know, rather than speculate about theoretical powers that they could use, but we already know that when you buy a property from, I think it's something like 2006 onwards, the stamp duty land tax forms all go to HMRC anyway.
Right.
So anybody who's bought a property in the last 20 years, HMRC categorically know that you own that property.
Wow. So
let's just imagine you've bought 5 properties and you're also living in your home.
Yeah.
They know you've got 6 properties.
Wow.
That's not complex.
Not hidden.
They can type in your national insurance number. They'll see that there's 5 properties that you've purchased, and if you're not declaring rent, they know they can't live in 6 houses.
Wow.
So even if we just look at the stamp duty land tax forms, they already know a staggering amount of information.
Right.
So what you then also got is, like, on the other end of the spectrum, so we can categorically say they have that information. On the other end, what happens quite a lot is actually people report information to HMRC.
Yeah.
Now, some of them do that legally because they have to. People like letting agents, I've already mentioned. So letting agents will get forms that say, over the last 3 months, give us a list of all your landlords and, give us enough information to be able to identify them.
Yeah.
So again, if you've bought 6 properties or 5 properties that you rent out and they're all managed by an agent, HMRC now have 2 pieces of pretty concrete information.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
If any of your tenants have been claiming any kind of income support, then again, that's another piece of information.
Yeah.
Now, HMRC haven't got direct access to that, but the local authority is, of course, part of the government, and that information is easily accessible. And then, I suppose the thing that people forget as well is not everyone you speak to is proud of what you do and all happy for you and will quite happily snitch on you.
Yeah.
So a lot of inquiries from HMRC start because of ex-partners in a divorce, or breakups, or business partners falling out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why HMRC can get you on their radar.
Yeah.
And like I say, even from what I've already said there, if you think about it, if I was to plonk you in a seat at HMRC tomorrow, and all you had was the stamp duty land tax forms plus access to people's income tax returns, it wouldn't take you long to start finding people who aren't reporting.
Yeah.
So I genuinely think it's a matter of time. There's a pal who's messaged me actually. Hi, John. I see you listening there. John and I quite often sit and we'll talk about how it'd be great to work at HMRC on a commission basis. I think I could make a lot of money quite easily if they gave me access to their information and So it would be interesting to see it from the other side. But I think there's a lot of, like I say, a lot of people are going to get a knock on the door.
Yeah. So I suppose some people use the properties for Airbnb. I think from there as well they can get the information.
So a lot of online platforms now, whether it's eBay, Vinted or Airbnb, all have to share information with HMRC.
Really?
But also don't forget, Airbnb is one of the most obvious forms of advertising. So if they can look on to see who's advertising properties.
Right. Wow.
And of course, it's not hard to see that number 18, Baker Street in London is advertised on Airbnb, where we'll just see who the owner is, and then we'll see if they're declaring any rent.
So even if you rent out the part of your home or house, you can still...
Well, if you're advertising it, So if you're on a platform like Airbnb or, bookings.com or something like that, HMRC can see that advert just the same as anybody else.
Wow, really interesting.
So and that's just public information. It's quite funny. People will advertise exactly what they're doing and then wonder how HMRC know that they're doing it. especially with Instagram now. A lot of these property investors will literally show you every single thing they do, and forget that anyone can watch that.
That's really good information. Yeah. And people don't realize sometimes, isn't it, that even the social media that could be accessed by the HMRC as well.
Of course.
And if they ask the information, they will always get it, isn't it?
So HMRC have got pretty good powers. If they can demonstrate that they believe there is tax loss in a sector, they can get the information.
Wow, really good information. So we'll go to the second question I have got. I have got all these questions from the feedback of the people, so I'm asking only those questions today. So but before we do that, we'll play one track and then we'll go to that question. So stay tuned, guys. I've got very interesting conversation going on with Martin Wardle, who is the chartered tax advisor. So let's go.
तू मेरा कोई ना होके भी कुछ लागे, तू मेरा कोई ना होके भी कुछ लागे, कि यारे जो भी तूने कैसे किया रे, जिया को मेरे बांध ऐसे लिया रे, समझ के भी ना समझ मैं सकूं सवेरों का मेरे तू सूरज लागे, तू मेरा कोई ना होके भी कुछ लागे, तू मेरा कोई ना होके भी कुछ लागे, तू मेरा कोई ना होके भी कुछ लागे, अपना बना ले पिया, अपना बना ले पिया, अपना बना ले मुझे, अपना बना ले पिया, अपना बना ले पिया, अपना बना ले पिया, दिल के नगर में शहर तू बसा ले पिया. छूने से तेरे हाँ तेरे फीकी रुतों को रंग लगे, छूने से तेरे हाँ तेरे फीकी रुतों को रंग लगे, तेरी दिशा में क्यों चलने से मेरे पैरों को पंख लगे, रहा ना मेरे काम का जग सारा, हो बस तेरे नाम से ही गुजारा, उलझ के यूं ना सुलझ न सकूं, जुबानियाँ तेरी झूठी भी सच लागे, तू मेरा कोई ना होके भी कुछ लागे, तू मेरा कोई ना होके भी कुछ लागे, तू मेरा कोई ना होके भी कुछ लागे, अपना बना ले पिया, अपना बना ले पिया, अपना बना ले मुझे, अपना बना ले पिया, अपना बना ले पिया, अपना
Welcome back, guys. Mayank Patel here from Property Pulse, and I've got Martin Vodel, Chartered Tax Advisor. Really interesting conversation going on regarding the tax. Everything, think about it all the time, I think, because we are paying the taxes, and especially the landlords. And the way it is going at the moment is every time you are paying more and more and more like that. But yeah, so I'll ask another question as we discussed previously. So Martin, quite a few of my friends and landlords who are friends, they ask me that they normally ask this question. It's a very common question. I suppose you might have heard about it as well. So is it better to get mortgage on company name if you are a landlord, or and what are the tax benefits if you do that?
So it's not really a mortgage question. It's whether you should buy the property in a personal name or a company name,
Right.
Because you may or may not have a mortgage.
Right.
So yeah. So if we answer the question of whether a property should be owned by a company or by an individual, it's quite an easy one to answer once you know what the plans are from the person.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is, so for the last 9 years, people have been changing away from personal ownership into company ownership because of a restriction on finance charges. So a lot of people don't realise that landlords cannot claim all of their mortgage interest as an expense. They can still claim some, but not all.
Oh,
So this is a bit like if you said to a chip shop, we're only going to let you deduct the cost of half of your potatoes when you sell chips.
wow.
So the chip shop would say, well, that's crazy. I've got to buy potatoes to sell chips. But that's what landlords have. So what that means is higher rate taxpayers who have property can often pay well over 100% tax. So again, people don't realise that. A lot of people say, tax the rich, landlords should be paying more tax. Landlords already pay the highest ratio of tax of any group, because they can quite often pay many hundreds of percent. And what I mean by that is you could quite easily have a landlord who makes £1,000 profit but has a £10,000 tax bill.
Wow.
Now, I get challenged on that quite a lot, and I'm happy to go through the maths, and I can quite easily show how that works.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to build a portfolio and you're one of the landlords where your numbers give you a bill that's higher than your profit,
Yeah.
you can't afford to have many of them in your personal name, because you'll run out of money, quite
Yeah.
simply. So what happens is those people who are the most affected then swap to company ownership.
Okay.
So it's really important, though, that you look at who is affected and why.
Why?
And it's individuals with residential properties with mortgages who are higher rate taxpayers. Now, if you don't tick all four of those things, you don't really need a company. I see people who have a 25 grand a year job and they've got a downstairs Tyneside flat they rent out and they get 700 quid a month on it.
Right.
They should never put that into a property company. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
They're going to spend £1,000 a year on accountancy fees for no reason, and they won't save any money. In fact, it'll probably cost them money. Now, on the flip side as well, people look at the annual income tax and they compare company tax versus personal tax, but they forget to look at what the longer term plans are. Now, a lot of people don't realise that on the sale of a property through a company, you pay more tax on the sale in the company than you would as an individual.
Okay.
And you've still got to get money out of the company.
Right.
So if you were a as you are, Mayank, a very successful individual, let's say you sell a property in 10 years' time and you make £100,000 on it, as an individual, you would only pay 24% tax at the moment. If that was in a company, you could pay up to a combined 52% tax.
Really?
So you would lose £27,000 on that property across 10 years.
Wow.
Which is quite a lot of money if you
I know,
spread that
yeah,
across
yeah,
the...
definitely.
So what you need to do really is you need to look at the individual circumstances, work the numbers. It's boring because everyone who comes in and asks this, they're always really excited.
Yeah.
And they've normally got an offer accepted on the house. And then trying to answer a very complex question.
Yeah.
when it's a little bit too late to spend the time on it. So what I always say to people is, how long do you want to own the property? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to sell it, or are you going to leave it to the kids? Are you going to leave it to grandkids? Do you need the income from it, or do you not need the income? So is it a retirement pot that you're building?
Yeah.
How big does the pot need to be for it to work? And yeah, these are all questions that people don't like to answer because they often haven't thought about that long-term plan.
Plans, yeah.
So yeah, what I say is the tax actually sounds complex, but the tax is the easy bit. The plan is the hard bit. And that's the bit that people often don't have.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to summarise, 1 or 2 properties for a modest earner. Probably a company is more of a cost than anything. But if you're a 6-figure earner anyway and you want 20 properties to put away for the next 50 years till you retire, company is a great thing for you.
Yeah, normally I thought like that, and I quite a few friends who ask me, and I said the same thing, that if you are buying 2, 3, 4 properties, then don't go for the company. But yeah, now it is from the specialist, so everyone will be happy, I suppose.
So unfortunately, the boring bit, Mayank, is that there isn't a single answer. But what you tend to find is once you start to ask a couple of questions, you can get a feel quite quickly for the direction. So that's one of the benefits of speaking to an advisor, in that we'll literally save you money. The amount of people I've told they don't need a property company, which immediately saves them £1,000 a year in fees. And they go, it would have been very easy for you just to sell me a company and take more fees. Well, it would have been, but it would have been the wrong thing to do.
So I think it's always advisable that if that type of questions regarding the taxation is there, then the landlord should contact the tax advisor. If they don't sort it out themselves, or if they can't, then they should always, what do you say?
Most advisors, myself included, are very happy to have an initial chat without any charges. So I'm very happy to have an initial 10-15 minute chat. I very regularly get sent copies of people's tax returns and their circumstances to review. I'm very happy to look over them. If I spot anything, then I'll let you know if I think you're getting something wrong. And again, a lot of people see advice as a cost. It isn't really. It's an investment. It sounds very corny again, but I'll give you one example of a husband and wife who I'm seeing this Friday, actually. High earning husband, non-working wife. They've got a bunch of properties where all the income at the moment is taxed at over 60% in the husband's name. His wife has no income. They could be paying 20% on that. So he's making about £20,000 a year, and he's paying £12,000 tax. They should only be paying £4,000 tax. And that's what we're going to put right for them. So their fee to me is a lot less than £8,000 a year.
Definitely.
And they're going to save that forevermore once we fix that. So like a good advisor will not only help you save money, but they'll help you make more money as well.
All right, excellent. And paying, I think I would rather pay 100 than pay the thousands, isn't it?
Well, I'm a little bit dearer than 100, Mayank, but I take your point. we'll say a few hundred is better than a few thousand, but absolutely. One more question which comes up all the time to me as well, that some of the people, they have got the companies as well. I'm not sure it is tax related or not, but you might be able to answer that as well, Martin, because you have got experience regarding the owning the property as well. So do you think is it better to take salary, or is it better to take dividend from your company if you already have the company? What do you think? If you've already got a company, then it's fairly standard planning these days to take a nominal salary. So you might take £1,000 a month. I'm just a ballpark figure, not exactly. But let's say you take £1,000 a month out of a company, and that will use your personal allowance. Now, that's the tax-free amount that you're allowed to make before you pay any tax. So most people take about that £1,000 a month. It also gives them a tick towards a state pension credit. So you're doing quite a lot of work already in one simple action there. Beyond that, it is normally better to take dividend. It's normally more tax efficient.
Right.
However, there are a lot of occasions where the basic salary model with dividend doesn't really work. Now, it doesn't work, for instance, if you're not making any profit in the company.
Right.
So a dividend is a distribution of profit from a company after it's paid its own tax bill.
Tax bills, yeah.
The key thing is there has to be a profit to pay a dividend.
All right. Okay.
So if you're a property investment company and you're doing the, buy, refurbish, remortgage, rent model, then you might spend 20 grand on a refurbishment on every property that you buy.
Right.
You might only make a couple of grand a year on it if it's a modest property.
Right.
So what you'll find is your company isn't actually making any profit for years because the 20 grand refurbishment quite often is an allowable deduction. So what you have is people say, well, I want to take money out. And although they're making a cash return, they're building up money in the company. It isn't a dividend, so dividends aren't available to them. And we see that quite a lot. So if you want money out in that scenario, you might not be able to do a dividend, even though it's the most tax efficient.
Yeah.
A lot of people also ignore the fact that a property company is often started with their own seed capital. So again, we've mentioned you might be building a company up, and you might say, well, I've got 50 grand here, I'm going to put that into the company, and we'll use that as deposits to then go off and build a portfolio.
Yeah.
Well, that £50,000 is already yours. It's already your own individual money. So you can take that back out. As soon as there's spare cash in the business that isn't needed for something else, you can use that to repay that loan to yourself. And that is tax neutral. Just the same as the money can go into the company without tax, it can come back out without tax.
Without tax. Wow.
So what you've really got is probably three areas to look at. You've got salary, you've then got dividend if it's a profitable company, and you've also got the repayment of capital account. And using those three things, you can normally then give people the best scenario.
Right.
If you've already got other income though, so let's say you've got a 50 grand a year job anyway, then it's kind of a moot point because it doesn't really make a great deal of difference whether you take salary or dividend out once you're a higher rate taxpayer.
Yeah.
So it makes quite a bit of difference, if it's your first 50 grand, if it's additional income, it doesn't really make that much difference.
Yeah.
It's also worth saying as well that salary is a bit more flexible because me and you might have a property company and I might do all the work, obviously.
Yeah.
And, you're fairly passive there. You just ring me up and say, where's my money?
Yeah.
But let's say I'm doing all the work. If we've got the same shares in the company, the dividends would normally have to be paid to both of us, which might not represent the effort that people have put in.
Right.
So you might say, well, Martin, you can have the first £10,000 of profit and we'll do that as a salary. And after that, we'll take dividends of whatever's left in the pot. So salary gives you a flexibility that you don't always get with dividends as well.
Oh, that's really good information. So as I get this, you are meeting that couple today or this Friday?
Friday, yeah.
So for them, I think if the wife, if sees the one who is getting the benefits from the company, then it is much better then, isn't it? Because she's not working. So can she do that?
Well, so they haven't got theirs in a company, but if they did have, then what you would try to do is you within a married couple or a civil partnership, then yes, you try and equalise the income. And that's all we're talking about there. But whether it's property or just investment income on a bank account, equalising income between couples is tax planning where you start, really. That's tax planning 101. So that's where you always start. But as you can see here, anything I'm talking about, Mayank, I don't know how this is coming across on the radio, but this is all quite complex, which is why,
always even for these many years I have been in property, but it's always complex for me as well. Whenever it's taxation.
And of course, it changes all the time as well. Tax changes. It's been changing twice a year now for many years.
I know, and that's why it's very crucial that you get the proper advice, isn't it? That's what I was asking you, and then you. So can you summarize something how it could be?
So yeah, I mean, like I say, the starting point is, I always think people think they can Google anything or you can chat GBT anything.
Yeah.
So as good as Google is and chat is, the way I would put it is, although you can ask any question, if you don't know the question, it doesn't matter. You can't answer a question you can't ask. Any good tax advisor, myself included, will normally do an initial fact find and be able to give you a steer in the right direction. And we've been talking quite a lot in here about how complicated it is and how many ways that HMRC can get their hands on you. But just as often I see people who are paying a lot more tax than they need to because the complication has put them off getting the advice in the first place. And what I literally have had people, crying with tears of joy when they realise they're not going to jail, for instance. That sounds crazy, but I've literally had people who you can see the relief across their face when they talk to me and say, wow, I thought I was getting this, wrong all these years. And I go, no, you've got this right. And if anything, you're overpaying tax. Let's get some money back for you. And that happens probably more often, to be fair. There aren't that many people who don't declare anything because it's so hard to get away with it. More often than not, I'll say to people, well, you didn't put that kitchen replacement through. Oh, I didn't think I could claim that. Well, you probably can. And that comes up quite a lot. People spend thousands of pounds on repairs and they're not claiming the repair
it back.
because they just didn't think they could.
Even I didn't know until today.
Well, there you go. So let's. I need to see copies of your tax returns, and we'll. What you tend to find is, because I do this is what I do. If I was trying to host a radio show, I wouldn't introduce you onto my radio show. You're the expert. You know what you're doing. There's about 400 buttons in front of you there. You're making it look easy. This is what I do for a living. Just the same as I would speak to someone like Paul, who was on the other week about mortgages. Just the same as I get the gas engineer in to service the boiler.
Definitely.
I don't try those things because I know they're complex areas.
And that's how I say to the people, means it's really good advice, but for every landlord, I suppose, if you have any doubts or anything like that, please don't go to the social media and ask to the people, because you will get 100 different answers over there, and it could be possible that none of them are right. And that's why it's very crucial to talk to the specialist like you, Martin, I suppose, where you can get, and as you said, most of the specialists like you, they don't charge anything initially.
Costs nothing to find out. So I'm very happy to speak to people. You can you can get in touch very easily. martin@thward.co.uk. Send me an email. Ideally, send me a copy of your last submitted tax returns. I'm going to need to see them anyway. It's all confidential. If we don't go ahead, everything's deleted, and it costs nothing to find out. Just find out what you could be, how much little tax you could be paying.
That's really good, and thank you very much for that, Martin. And I know you always happy to help the people, and as far as possible, you do that as well. Can you introduce yourself and the your company as well? And give more details if you have.
I'm Martin Wardle. I'm the founder of TH Ward, and we basically look after your tax while you look after your properties. I let you pay the littlest legal tax bill. Think of it like that. We'll get it as small as it can be legally.
That's really good. So guys, here I've got Martin Wardle, specialist tax advisor, and he has offered to give some free consultation as well initially, as we discussed and as he said. So you can contact him anytime you want, and you can go ahead after first consultation. But Martin, thank you very much for coming and sparing the time for me today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
For all the really good advice as well on our radio show, on my radio show on Property Pulse. Guys, if you have any questions or queries, you can contact Martin as well. And thank you very much, Martin, once again.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm closing the show today, and I'll see you next time. But until then, keep investing and keep progressing, guys. Okay. Have a lovely day. Take care. Bye bye.